Welcome into the Rock Talk studio. Are you looking for a good new rock and roll book or documentary to check out? Well, here comes the inside scoop on all the details on the top recommendations and hidden gems you don't want to miss. Like today's book about rock's greatest power couple, who at the time was running from the government, making an album, and breaking up for 8 months and then getting back together. And that's just part of the story. I'm your host, Big Rick. Join me for an exclusive look into what's hitting the shelves and the screens, and get ready to rock your reading and viewing list. And today, the spotlight falls on the book Mind Games, John Lennon and Yoko Ono, with contributions from people who were there. And this book feels like you're getting a chance to actually read John and Yoko's diary. Lennon and Yoko were extremely open about their views and beliefs, and you get a very personal account of their life in these pages. It's 1973, and they are adjusting to living in New York City, and John is working on his 4th solo album, Mind Games. This book, all 288 pages and 750 illustrations, yeah, it is huge, covers a multitude of themes that made up John and Yoko's life at the time. It's beautifully put together, lavish, almost coffee table style book-like production. There is no narration to the book, just the voices of John and Yoko and the people around them during the time of the making of the Mind Games record. And this is a period where they were just getting used to New York and were a little disheveled by moving there. They were adjusting to the city. And because of their political peace and love statements and how they were against the war at the time, it brought them a lot of attention that they didn't want. And a fair amount of time is spent in the beginning of this book detailing the secret war against John and Yoko that the government was putting together. There's a lot of documents and articles and people quoted about it. And right off the bat, you get to see just how really deep this book is going to take you, with sharing items and quotes and personal feelings from John and Yoko. It's an intense period. And here, I think you really have to be into kind of the political side of things to enjoy this part of the story. There was so much going on. The government was trying to kick them out of the country. There was a drug possession bust. They were having problems with Yoko's daughter and ex-husband. There was just a lot happening in their life at that time. And there is a ton of personal keepsakes included in this book. And it's not just surface things. It's things you probably wouldn't expect, like a few pages on tarot cards, numerology, astrology that they were working with that coincided with the song Lifting the Veil. The details get a little crazy, but really enhance the depth of this story about the Mind Games period. The book is made up of chapters on each song from the album. There are 12 songs. And along with the song chapters, there are a few other chapters placed throughout to enhance the story of what was going on in John and Yoko's life outside the music. One of my favorites was a non-song chapter. It was the Dakota chapter. The Dakota was the apartment building they bought and lived in New York. And here's another example of how behind the curtain this is, because you get a real inside glimpse into their life and how they were living. It's really interesting that all this stuff really exists in the first place. They included an in-depth floor plan of the Dakota with all the different rooms in the apartment. John actually gave individual names to each part of the apartment, and pictures of each door with the little plaques on the door with John's names on them are included in this book. The song chapters, now they're a little bit different. They include handwritten lyrics with John's notes and scribbles and drawings on the pages. The song chapters touch on John's inspiration for the piece and what his intention was and what his message was and what he was trying to get across. And most of this is in John's words, which is really cool. Sometimes you will get Yoko's observations of what was happening at the time and how that influenced the songs. So you do get both sides of the equation. These songs, as John even mentions, are about who he is and what he is experiencing in his life. He is very raw here and open with his assessment of himself, his relationship with Yoko, and what these songs were about. And this was also during the time of John's Lost Weekend period, where he and Yoko split up for 8 months. And though it is touched on briefly, the book does talk about a lead up to the breakup, including an eyewitness account of the actual incident. As we get towards the end of the book, there is a chapter on all the members of the band who played on the record: Jim Keltner, Gordon Edwards, Rick Marotta, Dave Spinoza, Peter Klemnow, and Peter Ashner, and they all contribute their memories to this collection. Oh, and Jimmy Iovine, the famous producer, comments on his contribution to the record and his friendship with John and how he enjoyed and how easy it was working with him. Everyone actually in this book shares how easy it was working with John and how nice he was and how nice he was to everyone he met. The details of what is included in here is staggering. There's a letter from Jerry Rubin, a social activist at the time, about a proposed concert at the National Republic Convention in 1972. And that letter kind of started his problems with Nixon. The including of an impression of John's handprint that was used for an astrology reading. There's another amazing letter that Lennon wrote to McCartney proposing a concert with Mick Jagger, and all the never before seen photos, texts, and images. And they really did a nice job of weaving all this together to reveal not only the details behind the creation, recording, and release of Mind Games, but also to shed new light on a period of transformation and experimentation for Lennon and Ono. Mind Games, John Lennon and Yoko Ono, 288 pages. Now, this is the part of the show where I usually look at one big question that looms over the book or doc that I'm featuring, one thing that needs to be discussed to help you decide if you really want to buy this book. And today, I'm going to go in a different direction. Because of all the Beatles content released in the last year, something really stood out to me that ties directly into this Mind Game book that I want to draw your attention to. I'm going to talk to you about that after this quick break. Before I jump into that extra piece of content that I want to turn you on to, I want to give somebody a free book. Yes, someone is going to get a free book, a free new Rush book, and it's called Rush at 50. It's a hardcover collection that celebrates 50 years since their first record. It's a beautiful book with a ton of great pictures, memorabilia. Rush fans are really going to like this, and all you have to do is send me an email. Here's the address, and I'll put this also in the show notes, but it's info@rocktalkstudio.com. Simple. info@rocktalkstudio.com. Just put in the email that you want the free Rush book. And now I'm going to tell you up front that you will get an email back confirming that I got your email. And I'm also going to ask you if you want the monthly email blast. The monthly email blast gives you my updated top 5 books in doc for the year and news on upcoming titles. You don't want that? No problem. Either way, you'll be entered to win the Rush book. Oh, one last thing. Because of shipping, this is only for U.S. citizens only. And if you're not interested in the book, but you want the monthly blast with the top 5 books and docs of the year, just send me an email, info@rocktalkstudio.com, and say, Big Rick, send me over that monthly blast. May Pang's first boyfriend was John Lennon. Her first live-in boyfriend was John Lennon. Her first love was John Lennon. And there was a documentary that came out last year. It's called The Lost Weekend, A Love Story by May Pang, about her life leading up to meeting John and the relationship they had. And this doc fills in a major piece of Lennon's life that happened during the time of this Mind Games book. And as I mentioned, they do touch on it a little bit about when John and Yoko broke up. But this documentary is going to tell the whole story. It's going to tell you what happened and what was going on during those 8 months. It's a really well done doc, but this one is different from all the other famous Lennon Lost Weekend tales. This time, you get a deeply emotional telling of this relationship through the eyes and words of May Pang, whose narration of the doc really pulls you in and furthers the personal and intimate feeling of the story. With John and Yoko having trouble in their relationship, Yoko actually suggested, you might even say convinced, May to date John, and so begins their famous Lost Weekend period. The doc is full of May's personal items from that time, letters and drawings from John, and also some amazing archival footage, recording of John around the house, a ton of photos from the wild Hollywood lifestyle they were leading at the time. You can't help but feel good about the fact that May gets to tell her story here. She helped John get sober. She got him back to recording at the time. And most importantly, She played a big part in reconnecting John with his estranged son, Julian. I highly recommend checking this out. Again, if you're going to get into this book and you want to just learn more about this period of time, May Pang's Lost Weekend, A Love Story is a great documentary to check out. Coming up in next week's podcast, it's a huge show about all the new rock and roll books and docs that have just been announced and released. So if you want to get caught up and hyped up on new projects, including artists like Robert Hunter and the Grateful Dead, Elton John, The Tragically Hip, Low Cut Connie's in there, Bachman Turner Overdrive, and the Beatles, and Nicky Hopkins, to name a few, I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Love talking rock and roll and being able to give you the scoop on a title I think is worth your time and money. You can find more recommendations in the archives. They're all there. They're all free. So if you're a fan of Guns N' Roses, Joni Mitchell, CCR, Van Halen, Stephen Van Zandt, Robin Hitchcock, and the Allman Brothers Band, that's just a few. There's a ton of stuff in there. There's some great recommendations. Check it out. All right, tear it down, pack it up, and head on down the road. We'll see you next time in the Rock Talk studio.